Okay, as many of you know, Phil Lyman won the GOP convention with 67% of the vote. So he had an overwhelming victory at the convention. Then we were forced into a primary, and there are a lot of outstanding questions about the primary. We ran against the sitting governor, Spencer Cox, and Deidre Henderson. And Deidre, as the lieutenant governor, controls the elections and oversees the whole process. We have a lot of questions and concerns that are outstanding from the primary election. I wanted to take a few minutes and go over some of those details. People have reached out to me and they wanted to know, they want to see some of the documents and to know exactly what happened. And so this is my opportunity to explain it to you. So first, I want to talk through a couple slides that we put together. The first is, I've detailed I have 4 different points I'm going to touch on today on this gubernatorial race and especially the primary race. In Utah, really the primary is where these races are decided because we are such a high Republican state that the primary is where it really is the most critical election and usually the most competitive one. So the first I'm going to talk about Spencer Cox's nomination petitions. Because he didn't have the vote to get through convention, he decided to gather signatures to get on the ballot. The requirement is to get 28,000 signatures, and he submitted those signatures back in February. And then in March, it said that they determined that he had enough signatures. It was all done by the Davis County Clerk's Office. It's all centralized into one clerk's office, and the other county clerks are not involved in it at all. That's the first part. Second, I'm going to go into some of the lack of transparency with the primary election results. The third, talk about some of the potential election interference that we're concerned about. And then fourth is talk about our write-in campaign and what we are doing moving forward. So going to our first point is the nomination petitions. So this is critical for an election. And if you look at right now, the GOP is able to verify that Phil Lyman should be on the primary and actually the general election because the bylaws say that if you win at convention, you should be in the general election. So we should be there in November based on our bylaws. But because we have the second path to get on the ballot with this SB 54, candidates are able to bypass the delegate process where they meet with delegates in town halls and show that they are representatives of the platform, of the Republican Party platform. They're able to bypass that by just gathering the signatures and paying for those signatures. Well, we have concerns because those signature packets are verified by the Lieutenant Governor's office, whose exact signatures those are. So to make it not, they have contracted that out to Davis County Clerk's office. And there's concerns there because normally it would be done by clerks throughout the whole state, but they've chosen this one single clerk's office to do it. And there's a lot of concerns as we are seeing more centralization in Utah politics and in Utah elections. And when things are centralized in a single office, it raises concerns because it's a single office that can manipulate results if that was to happen. So the nomination petitions, we asked for access to be able to just view these names to make sure that Spencer Cox qualified to be on the ballot. And the way that a petition works, let me go to my next slide, is the history of nomination petitions in Utah. Greg Bell was the lieutenant governor before Spencer Cox. And when he was doing writing up about if they start accepting nomination petitions that are done electronically, he did a document about that, talking about the process. And in it, he asked the question, should petition signers be made public? Because that's really the question here is, if you sign a petition, should people be able to view who signed the petition? And his statement said, under the current code, information regarding the signer of a petition is public information, and our office sees no reason to change that. The question to consider is whether a person's name should be public as soon as they sign the petition or not until the petition is certified. Because he was asking if they sign an electronic document, if it should be immediately become public or not. And his answer was, if the signature is made public as soon as the petition is signed, that could be a protection against fraud, as any voter could check to see if their name is on a petition. We think that's a really good argument, and that argument is the same today. These petitions should be public documents. People should be able to look on it and see if their name is on it and make sure there really are 28,000 names on these documents. And we've had several people, dozens or hundreds even probably, reaching out to us and asking, is my name on the petition? And people can't access that. And they don't know because these are not publicly available to people and there's so many names are withheld. So we asked to be able to view these documents. This is what it looks like, a petition to nominate. When somebody when you sign these documents, it's usually, a lot of you probably had experience where you've had somebody come to your door unsolicited. It's usually a college-age student or someone, and they give you a form and they ask you to sign it. And if you see there's several signatures on the list above you, there's names below, or there's spaces where names will be filled out below. And there is no expectation of privacy on these documents because this is not a government worker at your door. This is not something that you wanted to do, that you went out to do. This is unsolicited for him to be at or this person to be at your door. And you can see that there's several blank lines after you that there'll be other people looking at the same document. So we believe that this is another reason showing why these petitions should be open and something that people can be able to have access to view after they've been signed. There's no other petitions. A nomination petition is listed in code under 20A section 1, and it's defined, subsection S, it defines what a petition is, a nomination petition, and none of the other petitions are treated with such level of secrecy as these have been. But they weren't treated like that at the beginning of the process. It was just changed when we started asking questions. So here's a timeline of what happened. On April 27th, it's kind of an abbreviated timeline, but is the day that April 27th is when Phil Lyman won the GOP nomination. He got 67.5% of the vote. And then in early May, there's an individual named Michael Clara who filed a grammar request to be able to view a nomination petition. And then in May 16th, there was an individual named Kieran Andrews who asked to be able to view another document for one of the school board races. And here is a document. This is a text message from Karen that she sent to the Lieutenant Governor's office, to Shelley, who works there. And she's writing to her. As you see, she said that she wanted to confirm that they had an appointment tomorrow at Davis County to review these signatures. And she says, yes, it's confirmed. Thank you. And great, I have you down set for noon. So she went in there. She was given permission from the Lieutenant Governor's office. Shelley is an employee at the Lieutenant Governor's office. She said, yes, if you want to see these petition packets, you can come in and view these at Davis County Clerk's office. So she went in and did that. So that just shows back to Greg Bell's quote, these are documents that should be able to be seen as a protection against fraud. So she went in to see it. Then we decided to ask, we became concerned. There's so many issues here, but we became concerned because once Michael, back to Michael, who had asked to be able to see Don Ipson's signature packet, first he was given access, and then they came back and said that Senator Ipson's signatures are not available because they're under criminal investigation in Washington County. And we found out that the same company that he had hired to gather signatures also was doing Spencer Cox's signatures. So this is all prior to the primary. So we thought we better ask for Spencer Cox's because they threw out so many signatures from Don Ipson's list that he was not able to get on the ballot because of signatures. He had to go through the convention. So we wanted to verify these same signatures on Spencer Cox and see if those same signatures that were thrown out of Don Ipson's were also thrown out of Cox's. So when we asked the Lieutenant Governor's office, let us look at the names of people who signed it, we were given this document. So this is, if you look at it, it says, this column is Spencer Cox because he's the candidate. This next column, these are the circulators. These are the people who are coming door to door asking for people to sign. These next columns it's for the first name, last name, address, precinct. All of that information came back private. So this document contained it contained 28,000 names. And of those, an additional about 4,000 that were just kicked out because they didn't qualify. Their signatures didn't match. They were from out of state or other reasons. So in total, there were about 33,000 names in this document. There was only an additional 592 that Spencer Cox had submitted beyond that. So he really does not have a big buffer zone of extra names. So they had verified of that 34,000 names, there were 28,006 that they found that were verified. And then there's an extra 592 that they hadn't reviewed. So when they gave us this document, we saw public names for about 60% of it. But then there was a very large section, 40% that came in just like this, private, and it had no data except for a county, private or withheld. And they didn't give us access to that. So we didn't get a full document. We wanted the full document. Those numbers, these are the ones that are really important, the ones that are hidden. So we continue to ask questions. So our argument number one is nomination petitions should be public. There's no expectation of privacy on them. no petitions are treated with secrecy like this. Our second argument is we're applying the rules of a voter registration. And this is interesting. If you look at, because that's where where people are able to indicate that they want to be called private or withheld. So if you go to a voter registration form, this is what it looks like, this document right here. This is what you sign if you want to register to vote. And then if you look at subsection 10, which I have right here, it's a little bit blurry, but if you mark yes, you want to be private, it says that I request that all information on my voter registration records be withheld from all persons other than government entities, political parties, candidates for public office, and for their contractors, employees, and volunteers. So we clearly fit in that category that we should be able to view the names of people who are considered private. We should have real data here and not just all these private names. We need to be able to see behind the screen, because the voter registration rules gives that access to a candidate. And it says to their volunteers too. So clearly Spencer Cox's people had access to be able, they went with the petition sheet to gather these names. We should be able to have access to view them after they had the resources to be able to solicit that information. So another reason why these are documents that we should be able to be viewed. Here is that same language that I showed from the voter registration rule comes straight from the code. And so it says the exact same thing here. If you, under where you can choose that to become private, it says, yes, I request that all information be withheld from all persons other than government entities, political parties, candidates for public office, and their contractors and volunteers. Same thing. So we should have access to that. It is put in code. And it's interesting because once we started asking questions, all the pushback happened. I showed you how Kieran was able to get access, go in there, see petition packets, no problem. When we asked, then they wouldn't let us, they only gave us a partial file, and they never, ever let us come look at the entire packets. They did say, if you want to view them in full, you could see them at the end of July, but that's after we redacted all of this information. And we didn't want a whole bunch of photocopies of things marked off with Sharpies. We wanted to be able to see the real document. So it's interesting that once we started asking questions, they started putting the stop on anybody asking further questions. So not just us. So we're candidates, but also the GOP had people, some of the county chairs, and my understanding is that our chair of the GOP, state chair, have also asked to view these nomination petitions, and they also were declined. So we couldn't see it as candidates. Phil is a legislator, he was denied access. We had our GOP political party was denied access, and we had other county clerks who asked to get access to it who also were declined. So these things are sealed up tight. No one can see them. And there's a problem with this. To add, there is a problem with fraud with these nomination petitions. So in April of this last year, there were 13 individuals who were charged with fraud because of their signature gathering efforts in the last year in the 2023 CD2 race. So there's a problem in Utah with it. There's several other candidates right now whose packets are being criminally investigated because of fraud. And it's a problem not only in Utah, but across the nation. In Indiana, they found that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama submitted hundreds of fraudulent signatures in Indiana that would have disqualified them to be on the primary ballot in Indiana, but they hadn't found out about it until 3 years later. So we don't want to wait for 3 years. We feel like people should be able to verify these documents. We feel like the candidate should be able to view these documents, legislature should, and the GOP and even the public should have access to it. It doesn't make sense, especially in Utah, when your opponent controls the documents. There's even more heightened reason why we should be able to view these documents. So we don't feel like we should have ever had to be in the primary race. Spencer Cox never showed that he was qualified to be on the ballot. And as people have looked at it, there is a legislative audit that just happened. John Dougal's there's a legislative audit, and then also there's two of them that are happening right now. And the one that John Dougal did, he found that there were problems. He did a statistical analysis and found that there are about 3 or 4 per 300 that were ones that they had reviewed and that they said were okay, that were not. And so it's likely, just based on that there wasn't enough signatures. And he had such a small buffer, like I mentioned, only 592 extra ones. When they did review those 592 and said that there were only about 65% of those were valid. where the entire bulk, they said 85% were valid. So if they look at the entire thing, there's a good chance that the 65% is more accurate than the 85, and that puts the number down to about 22,000. So there's a lot of reasons why we need to be looking closely at these documents, and it makes us more concerned the more we push, and the harder they push back on it. It seems like there's got to be an issue here. So we're not going away. We're going to keep doing this. People in Utah deserve fair and honest elections. And so a little bit more information. There's another reason why these documents should be viewed. One is that there's a balancing test. So even if they are considered a protected document, there's still a balancing test that they do under GRAMA to decide whether or not these documents should be viewed. And when Michael Clara was asking for Don Ipson's signature packet down in Washington County, they said the county may disclose the protected records if we determine there are factors favoring access instead of restricting access. And in this case, they decided that the factors favoring access to these documents that control an election and are a huge part of an election should be viewed. And they said that he would have an opportunity to view those. So they did this balancing test and found out it was in the public interest to view these. We asked, and then it was right after that, just a few days later, they rescinded that because they said these records are now protected because they are involved in an ongoing criminal investigation, which raises more concerns because we don't know if there's an actual investigation going on. They said we'd get these documents after this investigation was completed. They did complete it in August, but then instead of turning it over to us, they quickly turned it over to the Attorney General's office and said it's involved in a multi-agency investigation. So we don't know what's happening there, if this is just more of them hide the ball because we can't access it if it's under an investigation. So more concerns with all of this. But I bring this up because there is that balancing test, and we asked the Lieutenant Governor's office to also do that same balancing test to find that it's in the public interest to be able to view these documents. They didn't do the balancing test. When we appealed it, we asked them to do the same thing, and they also failed to apply the balancing test. So that was from our chief administrative officer. Now we have taken it to the 3rd District Court, so we're in the middle of the legal proceedings for that. They've never ruled on the merits of the case. We're still asking those questions. They denied our TRO, where we tried to expedite it, saying that they found there was no urgency in the matter, which, is kind of hard to find a more urgent matter than the middle of an election cycle. But so we're still pressing on that, and both on Spencer Cox's signature packet and Don Ipson's. We feel like Don Ipson's is significant for Spencer Cox's because the same gathering company was involved and because there's that criminal investigation and so many of his were found fraudulent. We did ask the Lieutenant Governor's office, we said, because you're not letting us see the documents, will you at least tell us if the same circulators were involved that were under investigation, or if you threw any of them out because of fraud, or and if you so, how many? We never heard an answer. All of these questions we raised before the primary. So, this is sort of interesting too. If you go to Lieutenant Governor's webpage, they push back and they say, we could never publish names of people who are private or give you access to private names or withheld names. But you go to her website, and if you signed an initiative or a referendum with the state, they've taken those list of names and they put it on their webpage. So if you look right here, this is a vote.utah.gov. This is a Lieutenant Governor's webpage. And if you go to look at the Restore the Utah State Flag Initiative, it says there are 81,000 signers of that. And right here, you can download all the names, and it includes all the withheld names and all the private names. And you click right here on the View the List of Signers. That was current and on there for several months. And I guess a year and a half or so, and they just took it down just a couple weeks ago. But that has been available to the public up until late August. So we have done all that we could do before the primary to verify that we even needed to run that race. And we asked the questions, we submitted the grammar requests, we submitted questions, and then we showed up. This is dated on June 19th. Before the primary, we had asked to just be able to come and view them in person while they were putting this information together. And they denied that request, and we said, we want to come in person to see them. This is a video that maybe a lot of you have seen where we went in just a few days before the election and said, please just let us look at them. Let us see with our eyes that these documents exist. And we were denied entrance. We didn't even get to go in the building. I'm sorry, not in the building, but in the office itself. So it's frustrating as the only challenger to the sitting governor who controls the race and controls the elections to be shut out of the process. And when all that information is behind their doors, behind Lieutenant Governor's door. So all of this happened before the primary. We did all we could to push for this information. And then the primary happened. And then moving on to my next point is we wanted to be able to verify what happened afterwards. So the first thing we asked for was a cure list. So if your signature doesn't match your on your ballot, if you submitted a vote, your signature doesn't match, they have what's called a cure list, and you're given a few days to come in and to match it up and make sure your vote's counted. And in the past, people were able to get that list. Candidates, I was a private individual, was given the list, so I could contact people in my neighborhood a few years ago and help them make sure that they got in to vote in time. This time we did the same thing. We wanted to do our due diligence. We wanted to help other people make sure that their votes were counted. We contacted several counties. Salt Lake County, Emory County, Utah County gave us the list of the cure list. That's a standard thing to happen. We went to Iron County, asked for their list, and they said, we'll give it to you. Let's just check with Lieutenant Governor's office real quick and make sure that's okay. And then they came back and they said, we don't give out that information. And then after we did that, every county after that denied our request to be able to see these cure lists. So it's really unfortunate. A lot of votes were not counted because their names didn't match up, because they shut everybody out of the process to help with that. The clerks did their part to reach out to people, but were not allowed to allow anybody else in that. And that became very significant in Colby Jenkins' race because he needed those votes in those key areas. And he actually went to court about it and asked if he could have permission to view those cure lists. And the judge ruled that it's up to the clerk's discretion of who gets those lists. So this is my second part of what I'm going through. This is showing some of how the pushback that we got to be able to verify the primary and have any information. So next we did a grammar request to be able to see some of the election results. We asked for cast vote records. That shows in the primary, it shows kind of the timestamp of when votes came in. There's concerns. There's been other states where you get, and even this last one, where you get a big drop right at the beginning. You don't know where that drop came from. And you want to be able to see which precincts it lines up with, and make sure that lines up with the voter rolls. Georgia just passed a really great law that says that if the cast vote records and the voter rolls don't match up, if you have more people voting than are on the voting rolls, then they can't certify an election. But we don't have access to these things. So we asked for cast vote records, voter rolls, tabulator tapes, several things. And within 24 hours of us asking for this, and the whole time we were running, they said, Phil, will you accept the results of the election? And he always said, I will accept the results if I can verify the results. So this was us doing our part to verify the results for the people of Utah. And when we asked for this information, we got this response came the next day from Deidre Henderson's office to all the clerks saying that any information, the cast vote records, the tabulator information, ballot images, the tabulated tapes, backup project databases, et cetera, are all considered election returns and are not public records and are thus not subject to GRAMA. So basically, do not give up any information about this election. Do not let anyone see anything to be able to verify anyway with these elections. And it's really concerning because a lot of this information was on our website prior to Spencer Cox becoming the governor. People could go to the county website and they could access this information. And we can't get it now. And, there's been other people, board of canvassers who are supposed to certify elections who said, how can I certify it if I can't even see that? That was in the 2020 election, if I can't even see this result. So the 2020 and 24 election have been extremely hard to be able to verify it because they're not giving us data. To this election, 2024 was even worse than the last one. And we're going the wrong direction in Utah. South Carolina just had a court case that said that these cast vote records are public records. People need to be able to access them. And last Friday, our Utah Court of Appeals just ruled against. There was some individuals who are asking for the information before, ruled against it, and said that they are not available. So it's more behind the more hidden information. And I think about it as like, it's a little bit about like playing a basketball game where you're playing against the referee is the opposing player, and the referee tells you the final score, but you don't know anything that happened during the game. They won't tell you any of the tally marks. They won't tell you what happened. You can't see any of that data. Just this is the final score. So it's frustrating. So the next thing I want to talk about is, and then we're going to continue to push on getting this information. We're going to go through court too and try to get more so we can verify this election. This is critical, not just for the primary, but for the general election. Changes need to be made. There's a lot of concerns throughout the country about election integrity. Elon Musk, a lot of people are pushing on it big time, and Utah's going the wrong direction. So it's time for us to clean things up. We're seeing Georgia, South Carolina, a lot of states are doing some really great things for transparency, but we need to be able to verify elections. It's critical. The next one is election interference. This is something that probably a lot of you are aware of. We asked a few weeks ago, Lieutenant Governor's office, what do we need to do to write, since we want to be a write-in candidates, we want to still push on these issues and be in the game. What do the voters need to write to have it count and have our vote be counted? They came back, Shelley Jackson works in the Lieutenant Governor's office, said that voters' intent is what matters, so any variation of Lyman or Phil Lyman is sufficient. So we went off of that direction. All of our marketing says Lyman. And then, as many of you know, the last hour, the last day, there were two individuals who went to file and said, named Lyman, who want to file for governor. And we are concerned about that. In the hours leading up to that, we had a coworker reach out to us and said, hey, my coworker Rich said he's on his way to the LG's office, that Cox campaign offered him $1,000 in a steak dinner if he will go file to run. And it was to confuse the voter. And so, see, James says, there's a guy at my work with the last name Lyman. Cox campaign is paying him to put his vote on the ballot to take votes away from the other Lyman. They're feeding him a steak dinner and giving him $1,000. So James told us that before we were really concerned. And then story checks out. He did go in and file that afternoon. He wrote to Rich and said, hey, Rich, you should record them on your phone. He was concerned about this. I think what they're doing might be illegal. Rich says, no, it's all been cleared. I checked it out. They're setting up an account and donating to me to run. And I'm actually the one that's registering to be a write-in. I'll record it all. So we are concerned about that. So if somebody paid for him to do that, that is election interference. And that is really problematic. And we need people to be looking into that closer. The fourth thing, my last point I want to talk about is the write-in campaign. So moving forward, Phil and I both know the problems with our elections. We've been in the game. We've been aware of it for a while, and that's a major reason why both of us ran. Phil ran a bill a few years ago called HB 371 that would have cleaned up a lot of things in our elections. He had no support from the legislature, which is, it's really telling. And I also did a statewide initiative called Secure Vote Utah, where we got signatures across the state, and people were overwhelmingly supportive of trying to clean up our elections, have us vote in person, same day, bring ID. And so we know this is a really big issue for people in Utah. So when we found all these problems with our race, we've got to stay in it. We've got to expose this. And so we're running it as a write-in candidate. So a couple of things people ask us about our race is, how likely are you to win? And a couple of things to think about is, one is Lisa Murkowski won her write-in campaign, and she was in Alaska, but her name's a lot harder to write than Lyman, so that helps us. People also, number two, people wonder about King. Will this get a Democrat on the ballot if we're splitting the Republican ticket? And two answers to that. One is check the polling, because as we looked before, he wasn't polling high enough to split the ticket. So even if he was getting around 20%, you have 80% left. And even if the Republican candidate split that in half, we're still getting at least 40%. So he doesn't have a chance of winning. Watch for polling, but also Spencer Cox's policies are really quite liberal. If you look at us compared to other states, he's bringing in so much of this woke agenda to Utah. If we had a Democrat in there, that could be, he'll likely get more pushback from the legislature when he's trying to propose these things. We have very liberal judges because of Spencer Cox. And, if King was doing similar type judges, we probably would get more pushback. And the third is that a write-in campaign forces the ballots to be adjudicated, so they will have to be hand counted. And if you have concerns like we do over the process, that will help with that problem. And lastly, we should never implement a process you cannot audit. These signatures should be able to be audited. The election should be able to be audited. People in Utah deserve to trust our elections. It is critical to our society. It is so important. And this is an issue that we are going to continue to stand up on, and we're not alone. There are people throughout the state. You look online, you look at their comments. We go to rallies, we go to places people are encouraging us and want us to keep standing up because this really matters. I saw someone wear a shirt the other day and it said, "Fed up, go vote." And that's how people feel in America. And that's how we should feel. If you're not happy with the system, you go vote and you make change. But if you can't trust your vote, what will happen? And that's where we are right now, because they have given us nothing to be able to trust it, no data to be able to trust what we have. And so we are asking the Lieutenant Governor's office, or the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor, to take the steps that they need to take to be more transparent with the people. This information should be available. It was available earlier on, as you see, like that they let other people view nomination petitions. These cast vote records and others were on the website before. They're available in other states. They should be available to the people of Utah. So we deserve to have clean elections. Our vote is sacred, and we deserve to be able to trust it. And we want to be able to trust, but we have to be able to verify. So I will include a lot of these documents. This is long, but I've had a lot of questions about it, and I wanted to go in through detail. I've got the documents that I'll attach in the description below, so you can look at them closer, reach out if you have questions. But we encourage people to get involved, and we each do our own part to try to push for clean elections. It's important in Utah. So thank you for standing with us and for your questions and being involved in this with us.